Okay, good morning. It's 2:55 a.m. Thursday, November 19th, 2020. I'm awake. I'd really rather not be. Not yet, anyway. I went to bed at a fairly reasonable time, 8 or 9 p.m. Feeling full and happy, but exhausted. Not really sure why I felt exhausted, just that I had all day. I woke up just a little bit after midnight. Only a few hours later. Drenched in sweat, not because it was hot, but because, quite to my surprise, my body had decided that whatever it was I'd eaten that day was up to no good, and it needed to be expelled from my digestive system post-haste. I lay in bed for what felt like forever, feeling the oncoming symptoms of having to vomit. You know, before it happens, you still kind of have this notion that, like, maybe I can control this, maybe I can dial it back, maybe I can just stop this from happening. But like a rising tide, it just continues to build and pressure and intensity, and the nausea comes in waves. Gentle but increasing in intensity. I hadn't thrown up in years. Years. Hadn't been sick enough to in a long time. In the past, as an adult at least, when I've thrown up, it has been almost without exception due to drinking too much too fast. Not eating enough before drinking. It's been quite rare. There's something I suppose not oddly humbling, but humbling about it. Because you have to be, prostrated, rather in undignified position in the bathroom over a toilet. I imagine it's very hard to maintain an air of dignity in that position, though I'm sure some have successfully tried. The whole experience made me feel, for a brief while, intensely aware of all the sensations of my digestive system. Just how much it was that I was aware of that I wasn't consciously aware of. Like the accompanying stomach pains after vomiting, which happens because of buildup of acid if it isn't all expelled, it also makes its way down your digestive tract. Very, very uncomfortable, very unpleasant. But also, my relationship with pain is an interesting one. Obviously, I tend to be averse to it, like, like most people. But it tends to wake me up. It tends to counteract feelings of not depression exactly, but the kind of disassociative fugue that accompanies it so often. I'm a very cerebral person, and pain or intense sensation, let's say, helps ground me in a way that quiet meditation doesn't. Mindfulness does, but mindfulness is such a discipline that requires consistency to really have a great degree of efficacy. And I fail in that discipline. Pain really helps you become more aware of feelings and sensations and stimuli that you always kind of feel, but you're just so used to feeling, so used to experiencing, that it hardly even registers. In a way, obviously, there's a parallel here to existential pain, mental, emotional pain. You know, the comfort or contentment or inaction of individuals, specifically Americans, what I'm thinking of politically, for example. People tend to become radicalized and pushed into being more political creatures, more active, progressive creatures out of personal experiences, or at least personally witnessing pain or injustice. And of course, we all can conceptually understand that injustice exists, that certain peoples are horrifically disadvantaged by our systems of production, reproduction. But it stays kind of academic and theoretical until something kind of shakes you up or bursts that bubble. It's why so many moderates fancy themselves as enlightened intellectuals, or that politics is just something that they find interesting. Or this notion that, I'm not political. These are positions of numbness, I think, more than anything else. Ignorance. Not ignorance in the sense that they're stupid or misinformed or are lacking in information, more so, and though that may be the case, more so that they are lacking in awareness. And there are obviously conditions that lead into that, right? Economic comfort, societal status, or advantage. I've certainly been complicit in this in the past, and, still today. I've certainly been subject to it too. In the last couple of days, I found myself thinking a lot about a fantasy. This fantasy isn't a new one, it's one that has popped up from time to time. But I'm finding myself fixated on it. The fantasy is that I can take all of my knowledge and experience and the whole of my person, mental, emotional person, and transplant that consciousness onto who I was 20 years ago. What would I do differently? Now, obviously, this isn't the healthiest exercise. Living in nostalgia, living in regret are horrifically unproductive. I can get into what I think it takes root in or is influenced by a little later, but it's not even, oh, I'd invest in this, or I'd buy stocks in that, or I'd buy Bitcoin, or whatever. You know, obviously, those thoughts occur to me. So do thoughts of causality and butterfly effect and wondering if I had done literally anything different, how would the world have turned out? Would it have mattered? If I were to live this life again, knowing what I know now, I would be more kind. I would listen more. I'd encourage people, particularly marginalized people, to speak up. I'd be a friend and an ally and a comrade. I can't help but think of gender when I think back 20 years, because 20 years ago I was 8 years old. Puberty had not yet onset, and I distinctly remember dreaming when I was 9, 10, somewhere around there. I distinctly remember dreaming about what it would have been like to have been born a girl. And waking up just heartbroken that it was only a dream. So much so that I prayed. I was quite religious at the time. I prayed insistently, begging me for God to let me dream that dream again. Because there was something there. There was something to it, and I couldn't quite place what it was. And this has been, a difficult thing to think about. I wonder if at 8 or 10 years old I had gone to my parents, probably my mother, said I don't want to be a boy. Wonder how she would have reacted. She loves me. I'd like to think unconditionally, but I don't think unconditional love exists, nor should it. Given her I don't know what would have happened. I can't fantasize about, oh, I would have been able to get hormonal blockers so I could undergo therapy and then transition. I can't think that far into the fantasy. Because I don't even know if it would get there. Now, I lived in Indiana for the most part. I was born in Kentucky, lived most of my life in Indiana, though I was liberal part of Indiana. I want to go so far as to say progressive. For a few years there, I lived in Connecticut, but largely just Indiana. Even if Mom had been willing and accepting and enthusiastically supportive, would I have been able to find a doctor? Would I have been able to find a caretaker? Or would I have been diagnosed and treated as if I was sick and forced to go through the dysphoria of puberty and navigating that and trying to find some peace in that? All the same, but with the added poison of being told I was sick. It's easy, I think, for us to forget just how much more typical conservative attitudes were even 20 years ago. And I can't decide if my inability to get invested in this fantasy is sad that I don't believe that it was ever really an option for me, or if maybe I'm using that as an excuse. Or maybe that's just a sign of, well, who knows. Certainly something to talk to a certified professional about. Not that I can afford that, and even if I could, mental health providers are in high demand. For many reasons. That was a goal for this year, prior to everything going to shit. When I was young, 12 or 13, I think, I, for a short while, around the time of getting into my first relationship, was really into the divination of names, numbers, and letters. And if you don't know what I mean, don't worry, it's all bullshit, and most of it I made up myself. But it was trying to use numbers and letters, combining them in mathematical formulae to, again, of my own invention, to predict or divine portents and signs and things like that. Utter nonsense, really, but I talked about this before. I kept finding again and again and again that 28 was a significant number for me. 28. I didn't know why, but I had this horrifying fear and cold assuredness that I would die at 28 years old. So, knowing that I would turn 28 years old this year, it was my determination to get a therapist, get a doctor, and for a year, undergo hormonal and chemical alterations to my body. To see, right? What's the worst thing that could happen if I'm wrong about this? Yes, there are obvious health issues, but like infertility, I don't give a fuck about. On the roster for this year, I wanted to get my tubes tied, so to speak. Vasectomy. I wanted a vasectomy. I wanted to get more tattoos. I wanted to really just go all in on the self-actualizing when it comes to my body, my physical body. I'm such a cerebral person. I live in my head so much, and then I get kind of dysphoric when I see and have to engage with the rest of me. I've thought about that quite a bit when thinking and fantasizing, as I've been talking about this notion of going back and doing it all again. Would I have dated anyone? I mean, it's kind of fucked up, a 28-year-old's mind and a teenager. Right? Like, the emotional intelligence, assuming I still had it. There's something quite disturbing about that notion. I recall, as a teenager, the predominant feeling I had was anger at not being heard, not being listened to, not being valued. And I can't help but wonder if that would be all the more infuriating, knowing what I know now, and being almost entirely sure that I would be ignored by the adults who made decisions for me in my life, because I was a kid. And so often that's the only rationale necessary to dismiss children. Out of hand, without real thought, consideration, or conscience. And no, I don't mean specifically my caretakers, I also mean my teachers. What would I have done differently? What would I have studied? Would I have advocated for things differently? I mean, I'm trying to put myself in a time where I don't own a computer. Google is still really new. Amazon is a book delivery service. The world is far more disconnected in terms of communications than it is now. In 2000, I lived in a court 2 or 3 houses away from my best friend in the world. We were about to move to Connecticut, I think. No, 2000, I may have just moved to Connecticut. One of the two. There's the lingering of, like, what could I change in a more broad sense outside of myself? Could I have... I mean, this would have been right during the first Bush administration winning or cheating its way through Florida. I don't think anything I could say would have warranted stopping 9/11, and that's not even as far as my fantasy goes. Maybe, but that just feels, even to me, thinking about that sort of thing is just so unrealistic that I can't even begin to grapple with it, really. I've thought about, which of my toys would I have kept or taken better care of in order to sell them later? What would I write down that I knew I would forget later on so that I could go back and reference it? How would my relationships with my family change knowing what I know now about their experiences at the time? Would I have gotten pets? What would my goals be? Because it's a fantasy, I like to think, well, I'm already quite learned. I write and read at a university level. School should be a breeze. So focusing on working out, taking better care of my body. Would I have drank soda? Would I have drank to excess quite as much as later on? Would I have partied as much? Like, I wouldn't have been me. Like, fundamentally, none of my choices would be the same. Maybe that's the part that makes this a really hard fantasy to carry through, but I keep coming back to it. Because I think in this fantasy there's and I said I'd loop back around to this, I think there's a fantasy of power and control. Knowing the outcome of things, or at least the motion or direction of things, years in advance, being able to be prepared. More prepared, at least. Get a leg up. Have an advantage. Because I am, right now, obviously, feeling very disempowered, very fragile, very vulnerable, very stuck, and afraid and tired and hopeless. Yeah, and I don't know what to take from it. I don't know what of value to walk away from this hopefully short fascination of mine. An appreciation, certainly, for how much I've grown and changed. I now have an urge to reach out to people I haven't known in decades. But those people I remember, those connections I remember, they don't exist anymore. A younger Alex would do that, though. A younger Alex absolutely would, but this Alex, the one I am now, is more convinced I just bother people by doing that. Remembering is painful. God, I wish I could have been a better friend. I wish I could have been more of an effective advocate for my beliefs. I wish that I had not struggled so much with depression and anxiety. I wish I had the tools and the experience I had now to better navigate it. So I would have performed better in school, so I would have been less toxic in my relationships. So I wouldn't have self-sabotaged nearly so much. I even got so far as to thinking linguistically how difficult it would be. Because your child suddenly overnight gaining the vernacular of someone 20 years their senior, using slang and idioms, memes, and references that no one else uses, and are completely devoid of any context. I think in that position you would have to lie, you would have to play, you would have to act, and in a way that would be strange and surreal, and you could never tell anyone. At best, they wouldn't believe you. At worst, they might. And then try to discover the means by which you accomplished it in order to replicate it. I don't know if it's good or bad, but fantasies just can't be simple things for me anymore. There's all this nuance. These levels of intricacy. I suppose in a way, it's empowering. Recognizing all the things I could have done differently, and I have the power to do differently. And reflectively, hopefully recognizing that today I still have the same power and energy and potential. That I could be better than I am. I could be smarter and healthier than I am. I have those choices available to me. There's a lot of things I can't control, but there are some things I can control. Yeah. I don't think around 2 life I would love anyone that I've loved. I wouldn't date anyone that I've dated. Their lives would be incredibly different by contrast. I wouldn't feel right doing it, knowing as much of them as I do now. I don't know if I'd have the capacity for a romantic relationship for a long time. I certainly think I could get off on the power trip of being experienced. But not in a healthy way. Not in a loving way. In a power trip kind of way. And it's something I'm not comfortable with. I'm very not comfortable with. You know, I can recognize I have the capacity to find pleasure or satisfaction in it without doing it. Without wanting to do it. Human beings have capacities for horrifying degrees of evil. Sadism, cruelty. And I think it's important to recognize individually our own capacities and tendencies, urges that feed into that. There are no good people. There are no bad people. There are people who do good things and people who do bad things. And good and bad are ultimately arbitrary. I think one of the greatest disservices we can do for ourselves is to convince ourselves that we are impervious to the worst perversions of our species. Just because you don't experience it now doesn't mean you couldn't. Just because you aren't twisted into a creature of hate and sadistic tendencies now does not mean that you can't be or won't be. Obviously, in the end, time travel, whether it be consciousness, whether it be physical, seems unconscionable. For now, at least. Things haven't gotten bad enough yet. But you know, if I'm lucky enough to be alive in another 20 years and global warming is doing as it will be doing in 20 years, you know, maybe we can talk again. And I might have some very different attitudes of if I could travel back in time, what would I do? I'm sure I would. I hope I will. I have a few calls I need to return today, which is all the more frustrating that I woke up at midnight. Calls regarding at least one, a position that I applied for, though honestly I can't recall the position, so I'll have to check their response to see if it's something that I'd actually be interested in and it's not a scam, and yeah, we'll see. I'm not a creature of optimism. Hey, every time I get in any way a feeling of, oh yeah, we'd hire you, I become like more sure that I don't want to be working right now. I like repulse from it. Like, oh god, I don't want to get back into the corporate world. I don't want to get back into the gross social interactions at a job. I don't want to find myself in a position where I have to bite my tongue and kind of degrade myself in order to survive. I don't want to be doing work that I don't care about in order to survive. But, you know, I'm not too proud. I want to do good to survive. Not to be complicit in order to survive. Unfortunately, in the world I've been handed, it's not really an option. I'm not really sure what to do today. How to be productive. Certainly I should apply to more jobs, regardless of the fact that someone got back to me. It's not something I should believe in until I get my first paycheck, and even then, it might be in my best interest to keep looking for something better. Though it would obviously give a great deal of assuredness. Security. Not really any games I want to play. The game I want to play is this fantasy that I keep talking about. I don't... The more I think about it and play through it and ask questions and think about it, the more uncomfortable I am with the whole thought experiment. So I don't really want to be focusing on that. I really don't. Stellaris is fine, but I'm a little burnt out on it. I'll keep working on my mods, but that's about all I want out of that. Warzone hasn't been really satisfying. Among Us is, but it doesn't really scratch that kind of cerebral itch. What I really want is God, I really want to be social. I want to go out and talk with people. I want to go to a museum. God, I just want to go to an aquarium and fucking sit in front of a tank and just look at something uncommon and wonder. I want to sit in a classroom and ask questions and have long, meaningful conversations that I grow from. I want to fall in love. I want to flirt and get to know amazing, exciting people. I have a yearning right now in me for all of these things I've been missing, not just for this year, but really for the last 2 years. Because, as I mentioned before, prior to leaving my job in late March, I worked night desk. And when you work graveyard, you don't really have a social life. But I had job security. I honestly don't even know where to begin in building relationships. Online, in person. Because although I have this urge right now, this recognition of this unmet need, I will often slip into depressive episodes, which make it really difficult for me to reach out to people and maintain these relationships. And, I am fortunate enough to retain some. But do people like me? Would they like me? Who would like me? Would I be good enough to get the attention and the affection and the camaraderie of people who I want to be friends with? Or would I feel like I'm just settling? Would I find myself answered and affirmed, or would I find myself further convinced by the lack of responses, the lack of receptivity, and reciprocation? Would that feed into my insecurities and neuroses? Would trying potentially put me at the risk of being hurt and afraid and alone more? And yeah, obviously the answer is yes. I mean, anytime you put yourself out there emotionally, intellectually, physically, whatever, you are risking rejection. And I still have a sharp fear of rejection. A sharp fear of abandonment. Abandonment is what really fucks me up. And like, I recognize I have all this baggage. All these things that I'm working on, and I'm thinking about, and I'm growing with, and coping with. But, I'm not going to therapy. I am not getting the aid of trained, certified professionals to help me. Do I need it? I don't know. I'm kind of unqualified to make that assertion, right? And, I would be if I could afford it. I would be if I had access to that. Which makes me feel guilty about the prospects of entering into any sort of new relationship. Romantic, sexual, platonic, or otherwise. Because I'm not the best me. I'm not at my best. Obviously. I'm not at my healthiest. We never are. We're never perfect. And I don't think because I'm imperfect that I'm undeserving of love, but sometimes I do, I think. Sometimes I do look at myself and go, yeah, I'm a fucking handful. I'm exhausting. I'm depressing. I'm excruciating at times. And I can see all the reasons why somebody would not want to love me, or would want to leave me, or would need space and time away from me, or get exhausted by me. I can see that reflected in past relationships, dynamics in current relationships. And yeah, I don't think I'm good enough. Not physically, not emotionally. Well, probably not sexually, if I'm being honest. I'm a lot more secure in that than I had been as a teenager, particularly, but still, so much importance and unrealistic expectation is levied on sexual ability as a qualifier for your deservedness or uh, quality as a partner. That even after dozens of partners and overwhelming positive feedback and constructive feedback, the best kind, I still have a great deal of anxiety. Holy shit, I get so nervous the first time with someone new. I get so fucking scared. And, confidence builds eventually. And I almost inevitably reach the point where I have a surplus of confidence, and it leads to narcissistic tendencies or I don't know, not necessarily, but I definitely have a capacity to become overly confident and have that erode my capacity and intuitiveness with empathy. Less so now, more so when I was younger. That's been something that's had to be learned and unlearned. I mean, hell, and all the reasons I just gave for why I might not do it, or why I'm scared or apprehensive or anxious about finding new relationships, new people, new communities. I didn't even mention that there's an epidemic right now that's the worst it's ever been and getting worse. And that, in terms of community health and my own individual health, literally any human being I interact with is a roll of the dice, where the odds by the day get worse. That's difficult. It's very difficult. I'm okay. And today when I say I'm okay, I genuinely mean it. I need to go grocery shopping. I'm so sick of rice and beans, burp and peanuts, and vitamins. But I hate buying fresh greens because they go so quickly, and yogurt. I eat a lot of yogurt. I'm so sick of going to the store so fucking often because it scares me every single time. My anxiety peaks every time I have to go out in public. Even if I don't touch another human being, even if really I'm never within 5 feet of another human being, a trip to the grocery store is one laden with fear and anxiety. And so I've been ordering out food, but then I have anxiety about that as well because that involves an interaction with another person. I'm not saying that we should advocate for cutting ourselves off from people entirely, but I just don't fucking trust people. I don't. I had an interaction with the delivery driver, a week or two ago, where I went out to get my pizza. It's either pizza or teriyaki. Those are the only two things I order, really. Because if I want Mexican, there's a great place 2 doors down. Regardless, I walked up to their car. They opened the door without a mask on. I was like, I didn't say anything. I had a mask on, obviously. And I just kind of looked at the older white gentleman. And I think it's important to point out he's a boomer and he's white. Because, of course, in Seattle, those are the people who I see not wearing masks the most. Fucking idiots. And he's like, I don't have to put this thing on, do I? He says, pointing to a mask on its dashboard. And I laugh, saying, well, at this point, it's kind of too late. As a kind of fuck you, buddy jab. He's like, yeah, well, it's not that bad, you know, fatalities rate is less than 1%, do just the normal horse shit you hear from these assholes who are trying to convince themselves that it's something to not be afraid of because they're so uncomfortable and emasculated by the idea of fear that the notion of recognizing the validity of fear and concern and empathy is antithetical to their identity as a man. One of those dicks. And I said to the guy, I'd be more concerned for you than I am for me. Now, I'm young. And that didn't really connect with him either. I think the macho response there is, oh, I'm tough, I'm fine. No, you're not, dude. There's people like you, men like you predominantly. Though there are some very anti-mask women, very... yeah. But men, I find, white men particularly, are the most frustrating when it comes to mask discussion. Then again, I haven't had a lot of conversations with anti-masker white women, or women in general. It's always white people. I mean, in my interactions, it's always white people. Because, you know, I'm from Indiana, born in Kentucky, lived in Connecticut. I've been from very white parts of the country. But Alex, there are considerable minority communities. In fact, the place you lived in Indiana has one of the highest Asian American communities in the United States by per capita. Yeah. But still, man. Still. Comparatively, I did not grow up in the most metropolitan areas. And the circles I am exposed to are not the most metropolitan either. Now they are, obviously, living in Seattle and curating my social circles as I do, but sometimes people slip through the cracks. I don't really have a takeaway for tonight. I'm tired. I am physically ill. I think it's over, but still I feel like garbage. I need to make food, but the idea of food disgusts me right now, and like I said, it's rice and beans and yogurt, none of which sound good right now. And peanuts, which again doesn't sound good right now. I take vitamins and I mix in things like, can't remember what it's called. I mix in other grains and stuff to get all my fucking proteins and nutrients and yada yada yada. But at this point it is like wildly bland and unappetizing. I've just done it too fucking much. But I don't really have the income at the point where I'm comfortable pivoting. I don't have an income, right? So I'm not comfortable pivoting to, going back to Imperfect. Oh, so Imperfect gives me so many fucking cardboard boxes I have to break down and take out to recycling. Like, half of those boxes I had in my living room, and I did laundry. I took recycling out, and that's part of what helped me snap out of being depressed, is improving your immediate conditions. Imagine that. Half of those boxes were from Imperfect. It's great, and it helps reduce food waste, and it's really easy and convenient. It's all pretty damn healthy, but also, like, the cardboard, my god. That's a very classed thing to complain about, I think. Oh god, I don't know. I'm tired. I just want to sleep. I just want to sleep until like 8 in the morning, 10 in the morning, and wake up and return the phone calls I got yesterday and look through my emails and then go through the application process for whatever new listings have come up in the last 36 hours. And I really don't know. Really don't know. Like I said earlier, I don't know what I want to do today. I'm really lacking direction. The way I'm feeling pulled, the things I'm wanting and I'm missing are not realistic, healthy, or... Well, they're realistic, I think, but they're not healthy in terms of, like, actual physical health things to pursue right now, not physically anyway. Maybe I should just start out easy. Respond to people I've not responded to. Talk to some friends. Eat something. And go from there. That's not hard, but... it does get tedious. Yeah. I'm not happy. But I'm not sad. I'm not depressed. I'm not feeling existentially exhausted or in dread right now. I more feel floating. Anticipating. Not anxious, but like... not grounded. I'm not feeling grounded at all whatsoever. Maybe I'll find that today, but smart money's on not. Maybe you'll have good news out of today, but smart money's on not. But I'll live today and tomorrow and for, the foreseeable future. By that I mean month and a half, then after that it gets dodgy, but right now, immediately, I'm okay. The vast majority of Americans, even prior to the financial collapse, even prior to COVID, lived paycheck to paycheck. The vast majority of Americans. And I'm not even to the point where this is effectively paycheck to paycheck. If it were, my next paycheck would be at the end of next week, and then I would get 2 more paychecks, assuming I get paid bi-weekly, because most companies are on a bi-weekly thing. I'd be 3 paychecks out, basically, at this point, which honestly would probably be more money than I have right now. Yeah, even at my last job, it'd be more money than I have right now, but it's fine. I'm not a paycheck away from being broke. I'm 3 away, which still puts me substantially better than most people. God, this country's terrifying. It has failed so many people on so many levels. But it's been an hour. I know that's not a great point to leave off of, but that is overwhelmingly what I've been feeling, oh God, for this year, predominantly. We can do better if we are to survive with any semblance of dignity, humanity, and empathy, we must do better. We cannot rely on elected officials to do better for us. We cannot rely on appointees to do better for us. We have to organize, mobilize ourselves in strikes, in work stoppages, in marches, in direct actions, yes, in voting, yes, in polling, yes, in donating, but also in more direct means of executing the very real power that we hold collectively. To that end, as I so often try to wrap up here, join the DSA. It's not a perfect organization. Don't have all the answers. But they're trying. And right now, that's a thing that is a rare commodity, a rare quality in any genuine capacity in this country. Join a union. They're not perfect, especially if they're associated with AFL-CIO and not the IWW. Because the AFL-CIO lets cops in their organization, which, like, no, cops shouldn't have unions. They should have the right to collectively bargain, but they should not be seen as comrades and stood in solidarity with the people that they abuse and use force to keep in line. Real stupid, AFL. But unionize, all the same, if you can. Join the DSA, all the same, if you can. Make action plans and organize with your friends and family and community, if you can. We're not dead yet. This isn't the end of the world. Not yet. Things are bad. Things are pretty fucking bad. The only way that they get better is if we do it. No one is gonna save us if we don't save us. I think that's an okay note to end on. It's almost 4 in the morning. Hope you have a wonderful day. Till later, I'm gonna say toodaloo. Take care. I'll see you then. Bye-bye.